Powering your RV. The Paradigm Shift. Brought to you by Travel New Trails. So I was talking to a friend who also happens to be an RVer about how I wanted to add some additional batteries to our rig. I already have 4 lithium-ion batteries and was wanting to add an additional 2. So I said, I found a great deal on lithium-ion batteries. I'm thinking about getting a couple more for our rig. And he's like, why do you need more batteries? Why don't you just get a generator? I'm like, I already have a generator. So he said, then why do you need more batteries? What are you trying to do? Power my rig. More batteries are better, right? He didn't seem to get it. I was stumped. It never occurred to me to think that he wouldn't understand why adding more batteries would be better. We went our separate ways and I got to thinking about the conversation. Why didn't he understand? It seemed so obvious to me why more batteries were better. That's when I had the aha moment and started to realize the paradigm shift I had gone through when we moved to an inverter charger based system in our rig. I really began to understand that this paradigm shift is not obvious, but truly changes the way you think about powering your RV. I'd like to help explain this paradigm shift, but to do so, I need to go over some RV power basics. In most all cases, your RV has 2 electrical buses, a 12-volt DC bus, also known as direct current, and a 110-volt AC, or alternating current bus. Plugged into the 12-volt DC bus are devices that typically require less power, such as your lights, your furnace motor, your awning and slide motors, and so on. The primary source of power for the 12-volt DC bus is a battery bank. Traditionally, these batteries use some form of lead-acid chemistry. However, it is increasingly more common to have batteries based on lithium-ion chemistry, such as lithium ferrophosphate. Lithium-ion batteries are better in almost every way. They are lighter, they charge much faster, they provide more power, especially in cold weather, and they have a significantly longer usable lifespan. Their biggest downside is their initial cost. However, over their lifetime, which can be 10 years or more, they are much cheaper than lead acid. Okay, let's look at the AC bus. Plugged into the 110-volt AC bus are devices that require more power, such as your electric water heater, if you have one, a refrigerator when it's running off of electricity, not gas, or your microwave, your air conditioner, and so on. For the 110-volt AC bus to be powered, it must be either plugged into shore power, or if shore power is not available, like when you're boondocking or dry camping, a generator. You also have an additional source of DC power, an AC to DC converter, also known as a charger. The converter is plugged into the 110-volt AC bus and the 12-volt DC bus. It draws power from the AC bus and converts it to DC current, in turn powering the DC bus. This is also typically how you will recharge the battery bank that is plugged into the DC bus. If the voltage being produced by the converter is higher than what is being produced by the battery bank, power will flow into the battery bank, recharging it. Here is where the difficulty begins. What if your AC power, either shore power or the generator, goes away? For example, if you're boondocking and your generator is powered off, or if you run out of fuel for the generator, the AC bus is no longer powered, meaning you can't use any devices plugged into it. If you want to do something as simple as make a cup of coffee in the morning, you would need to start your generator just to run your coffee maker. This also means that your batteries are no longer being charged. When they run out of power, the DC bus is no longer powered and you can't run any of those devices either. There is another option to power the DC bus, however: solar. In a solar electrical system, also known as a photovoltaic or PV system, solar panels collect light and turn it into DC power. However, the power being generated is not constant because the light levels are not constant. For example, if a cloud goes in front of the sun, the voltage and current drop. To smooth out this constant change in voltage, the solar panels are plugged into a solar charge controller. The solar charge controller takes the constantly varying voltage and amperage, or current, being generated by the solar panels, and converts it into a consistent voltage with a varying amperage, and puts it on the DC bus. You can then run as many of the devices on the bus as you have the amps to power. Just like the AC to DC converter, the solar charge controller can use any additional power not being used by devices on the DC bus to charge your batteries. The practical effect of this is that the PV system is used to charge your batteries, and the batteries provide the consistent voltage and amperage to power the DC devices, because batteries are a consistent source of power. So a more optimal RV power system will look something like this. The battery bank powers the DC bus, shore power or a generator powers the AC bus, and the converter and PV systems recharge the batteries and provide additional power to the DC bus. However, you are still subject to the following limitations. If you aren't connected to shore power, you have to run your generator to have AC power. And if you don't have sufficient sunlight, you have to use the converter powered by the generator to recharge your batteries. If you are limited on when you can run the generator, for example, or if you're in a campground that has restricted generator hours, or if you have a limited amount of fuel, you are limited on when you can use all of your devices in the rig, both AC and DC, and you are limited on how much you can charge your batteries. That's a lot of limits. There is another option to provide AC power from a DC source, an inverter. Inverters work the opposite of converters. Inverters plug into and draw power from the DC bus to generate AC power. They can do this in a couple of different ways. One is to produce a simple but harsh square wave, switching back and forth between full power positive and full power negative. Or they can produce a smoother sine wave. The smoother sine wave is much preferred, as the harsh square wave can damage sensitive electronic devices. This is why you definitely want to go with a pure sine inverter. They cost a little more than inverters that produce a simple square wave, but they will allow you to safely use a wider array of AC devices. By the way, you see the same thing with generators. Some generators, typically the less expensive ones, just produce a square wave, where the more expensive inverter generators will produce a smooth sine wave. There are some things you need to watch out for when running an inverter. First, as your converter is always plugged into both the AC bus and the DC bus, a feedback loop can be created where the inverter will be pulling power from the batteries to power the converter, which will then try to charge your batteries and power the inverter, and so on and so forth. Because converters and inverters are never perfectly efficient, this loop will end up draining your battery bank in short order, even if no other devices are being used. In setups like this, you should always switch your converter off when you're running your inverter, and vice versa. Second, if your inverter is on when you are plugged into shore power or running your generator, it can cause major problems. This is because the sine wave being produced by the inverter will very seldom match the sine wave being produced by shore power or your generator. This will create dirty power that will damage devices plugged into the AC bus. You should always power off your inverter when plugged into shore power or when running a generator. Or you should power off the converter and disconnect from shore power or turn off your generator when running the inverter. By the way, this also goes for shore power and a generator. You should never use both at the same time without a transfer switch to switch between the two sources. There is a better option, an inverter charger. Inverter chargers are devices that, as the name suggests, are a combination of both an inverter and a converter. They act as an inverter by connecting to and drawing power from the DC bus, to create AC power. They also connect to the AC bus and draw power from either shore power or your generator to create DC power. The cool thing about inverter chargers is that they can actually do both at the same time. If they sense a sine wave on the AC bus, they can synchronize the sine wave they produce to match the one coming in from shore power or the generator. They will then pass the existing sine wave from the shore or the generator through onto the AC bus. Some inverter chargers can even augment the AC power, providing a boost of amperage if the amps coming in from the shore or generator are not enough to power the AC devices. This can commonly happen in situations like the amperage spike you see when the air conditioner is powering on, or if you're already running a bunch of AC devices and turn on an additional AC device. Or if you are only plugged into a 20 or 30 amp circuit and need to draw a full 50 amps in your rig. Remember though that in these situations, the inverter charger is drawing the extra power from the DC bus and your battery bank, and can cause the battery bank to be depleted if it runs in this mode long enough. To summarize, what are the advantages of inverter chargers? First, if you are not plugged into shore power or your generator is not running, you still have both AC and DC power. Second, if there is no sun to power your PV system and your batteries are dead, but you are plugged into shore power or your generator is running, you have both AC and DC power, and you can charge your batteries. Third, if you are not plugged into shore power or not running your generator, and your batteries are dead, but you have enough sun to power your PV system, you have both AC and DC power. Though, you can only run as many devices on those buses as you have the sun to generate solar power. Any excess solar power, however, will be used to charge your batteries. As a matter of fact, if you have excess solar power that is not being used to power the rig or charge your batteries, some inverter chargers can actually take that power and push it back out onto the grid. Now, this would not be used while you're out RVing, but it could be used at home to augment a PV system you have installed at your house, where you already have a feed-in agreement with your power company and the appropriate equipment installed. Still pretty cool concept. So what does all this mean? If you have a system like this, your inverter charger essentially becomes the primary source for energizing your rig, both AC and DC power. Not your generator, not shore power, and not the PV system. It also means that you want to make your battery bank as large as possible because it is the primary consistent source of power for the inverter charger. And the PV system, shore power, and your generator are essentially used to keep your battery bank full. This is the paradigm shift that I was talking about. Let me repeat it to make sure you got it. The PV system, shore power, and generator are for keeping your battery banks full, because your battery banks are the primary source of power for the inverter and charger. And the inverter charger is the primary source of power for energizing your rig, both AC and DC power. I know this is not immediately obvious until you think it through completely. Once you have, though, it makes perfect sense why I would want to add more batteries to my rig. So the next time someone asks me why I want to add more batteries to my rig, I can explain it to them. Or better yet, just have them watch this video.